At the start of every NBA season, there's always reason to be optimistic for your team, and that includes the Chicago Bulls. Despite the Bulls not making some of the bigger moves or really kind of picking a clear direction on their roster, I still came into the season really optimistic about how they can improve in the margins and how that would help the team. And despite this team seeing tremendous growth through Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, I really still look at this team and the Bulls kind of competing for that last play-in spot with the 9th seed in that battle with the Atlanta Hawks. And I got kind of a different perspective on it. You guys know I'm usually tend to be very optimistic when it comes to the Chicago Bulls team, but on today's episode, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to get into it right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform you happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content. So we're still going to get to the mailbag today, but I want to start off this show talking about something, kind of airing some grievances, getting my thoughts off. This isn't going to be as kind of the structured shows you guys are used to, even on mailbag episodes where I have at least 1 to 2 predetermined topics and then I go into the mailbag. This is going to kind of be me more kind of spitballing, right? Just working through my thoughts with this team, and we'll see where that's going to take us. But ultimately, I want to talk about it, and shout out to, I believe it was Sydney, don't get me the line, on the post-game show last night, where she talked about, she said a quote, and it said, "What postseason, bitch?" And that really got me to thinking, like, even then I said that was a great quote, and it still is then, because right now, and this is why I'm frustrated with this team. We right now, as the Chicago Bulls, are competing for a 9th seed. We're fighting to hold on to the 9th seed, and the Bulls right now have a 70% chance of holding on to that 9th seed, meaning more times than not, the Bulls are going to be able to hold on to that. They hold the tiebreaker over the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks could technically pass the Chicago Bulls up today, but we'll see what happens with that and how the record finishes. But what are we really competing for, right? You guys saw the title of this video, "What Postseason, Bitch?" And that's really just because of we're competing for something that 3 years ago wouldn't have been a thing. When the NBA created the play-in tournament, it was to add a little bit extra, right, for teams, to get that extra playing game, add a little bit more excitement to teams that were finishing towards the bottom of their conference. But let's be clear here. It's not really the postseason, right? The play-in tournament, in all reality, is an extra game, maybe an extra game or two. The stats still aren't tracked. They don't count towards playoff stats. They don't count towards regular season stats. It's kind of its own thing. And the Bulls right now, and the franchise, this is not against the fan base, because you should want to see your team play as many games as possible if they're winning. But it comes down to the front office trying to sell us on something that really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean crap. Yes, the Miami Heat were able to make it from the play-in tournament to the finals, and in prior years they wouldn't have even had a true playoff spot. Same thing with the Los Angeles Lakers making it to their conference finals, and that's good and it's exciting, right? And I think that in a way, the duality of the play-in tournament leads it to be, if you're a team that's truly on the precipice, right, a team that maybe had some injuries earlier in the season, maybe your team just came along later in the season after some trades or whatever else, it allows you an opportunity to fight your way into the playoffs, where prior you would have just been like, okay, we made some really good moves this season. Let's see what we can add to let it go this offseason. But then you have the teams on the flip side. And that's where I think most teams are going to be, even with the play-in tournament as long as the thing. It's going to be used to either convince your fan base or convince yourselves that you're not really as far off as what you are. And that's where the Chicago Bulls sit when you look at it. The Bulls have gone from the 6th seed to 2 years being in the play-in tournament, right? That's really where it's at with the Chicago Bulls the last couple of years. And this front office continually tries to sell us on the fact that of something that we just know is not true, that it's not real, right? We started off in 2021-22. We finished that season as the 6th seed. We avoided the play-in. We ended up winning one game, getting eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. Last year, we also finished, as we barely snuck into the play-in. We won one game, lost a game to the Miami Heat that we, 4 minutes we would have held on, we would have won that game, but woulda, coulda, shoulda. This front office then used that to sell us on continuity, right? They used it to sell us on that. Even AK, as smugly as he got up there on the season end presser and said, Bulls fans are going to be really surprised by what we do this offseason. And you turned around, you did sign Ayo and Kobe to really team-friendly deals. You got Nikola Vucevic locked in, and you traded to be able to trade to draft Julian Phillips, and you got Torrey Craig and Javon Carter, two players that are really good role players, were before coming into this season, but ultimately weren't really going to up the ceiling for the Chicago Bulls other than if the Bulls really operated well. And when we say what the title of this is, what postseason, because this isn't truly a postseason for the Chicago Bulls, right? Whereas the Miami Heat right now in that play-in area, right, are a team that you look at because of the coaching, the excellence of that team, you could say they can make it out there playing. Well, also they would have been in the 7th seed as of right now, and they would have been in the playoffs anyway. Same thing with the Philadelphia 76ers. They have Joel Embiid there. If he's fully healthy, we know that that's at least a playoff team, right? But then you have the Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks battling for the 9th seed. Right now, the Bulls having a half-game lead over the Atlanta Hawks, and you got to ask yourself, what really the hell does that mean? It's not postseason. It's not any type of success. And this is why when people say anything about we got to keep DeMar for this, he's artificially inflating this team. If it wasn't for DeMar, and DeMar's been great, this is not an indictment on DeMar, the Bulls would not even be in the play-in area. And yes, Ayo and Kobe have played great for the Bulls. They've really stepped up a lot and developed and made leaps this offseason, and that is great to see. But guess what? If you would have had, because you would have had that same leap either way, but then you would have been able to add a lottery pick. You probably would have been adding a lottery pick next season as well. This Bulls front office continues to try to sell us on something that is really manufactured. Now, if the Bulls were to make it out the play-in tournament and into the playoffs, that changes this a little bit, but not a whole hell of a lot. The Bulls aren't competing for postseason. What postseason, bitch? Because this isn't a postseason. This is an extension of something that probably should die. That's what this really is right now. And it gets to the front office. And this is where you have the two different mindsets of front offices in the NBA. And I wish we had a front office that I trusted would look at the plan, whether we get eliminated or anything, and say, let's make sure we keep adding to this team. But unfortunately, we have a front office that we have to have some realistic fear that if the Bulls do look competitive in the play-in, that may just give them more reason to run it back. It may give them more reason to just double down and keep the same exact roster that we've been seeing together and hope. They may very well say, hey, just like Kobe and Ayo made a leap, let's hope that Julian, Pat, one of these guys is going to make another leap, and then boom, we're right there. Alonzo Ball. Oh, by the way, did you guys hear Alonzo Ball may be coming back? The problem isn't the fan base. The problem isn't necessarily the players either. Yes, the execution on the court, you got to hold them accountable for that. But when you look at this, again, and I got to apologize to my boy Winton Mahorn. Because at the same time, you have a coach like Billy Donovan that hasn't done crap. He hasn't really, yes, players have developed under him. When you look at the circumstances, yes, that's happened. But are we really giving their development to Billy Donovan? Are we really saying that Billy Donovan coached them or put them in a situation to where he made sure that he developed their game? It almost seems like the players on this roster have developed in spite of Billy Donovan, not because of Billy Donovan, not because of him focusing on their development, not because of him focusing on putting them into situations to kind of add to their game. It's because they look at it and they see what this team needs, and they go out in the offseason and work with their own coaches. That's why the player development department here is going to help, right? But that's not because of Billy Donovan. That's not because of that. And I give Billy credit for playing Dalen. I'll give him credit for playing OB at times. I give him credit for playing Julian Phillips. But where are we right back at? We're back to looking at Javonte Green, and no slight to Javonte, but we're back looking to Javonte Green to be the spark off the bench. A over 30-year-old player who is on a 10-day contract and is not going to sign for anything more than the vet minimum. Where this team sits right now is a result of lack of action and piss poor decisions, and that's what it is. And you keep using this. If the postseason was not a thing, I need everybody to focus on this. We would be now in 2 years out of playoff contention, and usually that is where a team really looks at it and say, hey, we got to start changing some things around here. But because of the play-in tournament, it artificially giving us a postseason type game and atmosphere, this front office, this specific front office, I'm not speaking for every front office in the NBA, looks at that and says, we got one. We got one. What the hell do you have? You have been sub 500 for 2 years in a row, and you finished the third season where you finished above 500. You won 6 or 7 out of your last 30-plus games. 30-plus games. This team, but despite an initial flash when this team first came together in that initial season up until Lonzo and Zach went down, and then despite some minuscule flashes of 14-9 stretch to end last season, which is another thing, we had to go 14-9 to get to the play-in. Not a stretch to get us and lock us into a playoff spot. We aren't competing for anything for real. And I know guys are saying, well, Haize, we've been telling you this. And it just comes to the point where I'm always going to hold out optimism for my teams, for my squads. I've spent 37 years on this planet rooting for the Chicago Bulls, rooting for them and the Bears. And I've been rewarded for a bunch of shit outside of the Derrick Rose era and some really damn good Luau Deng, Ben Gordon, Kirk Hinrich teams. But it's just the problem with this is it's not just ownership. It's not just the front office. It's not just coaching. It's a combination of everything because guess what? The players, to their credit, yes, they how they play on the court, how the effort they give is completely on them. But when you look at this roster and how flawed it is, when you look at the coaching and how much the coaching doesn't put players in the best situations, they can't coach. You can't outcoach nobody, right? We're talking about a coach in Billy Donovan who, unless his initial game plan just works to perfection, he ain't making no goddamn adjustments. What postseason are we really fighting for? What's really at stake here? Nothing, because it's nothing here. Right? It's nothing. We are competing for something that has been manufactured. And granted, everything is manufactured to a degree because what if the playoffs are only the top 6 seeds, right? You can say that. But at the end of the day, where the Bulls are competing for right now, this roster of veterans that we've held on to, and I know this season Zach P. Will went down, and a lot of people are going to look at it and say, well, listen, if we had those 2 players back, we're instantly better. And I think we don't also look at the fact that, well, if you take those 16 shots that Zach LaVine is going to take, those come away from somebody, meaning Io's not going to be able to have the same opportunities that he had prior. Kobe, I think that Billy Donovan's still going to run those plays for Kobe. He's the point guard. Billy Donovan's system is really dependent upon a point guard playing really great. But you're taking then somebody's not developing if Zach's still here. It's easy to say, well, if we had Zach, boom, we're in the playoff. We could be a 6 seed. Yeah, but then the opportunities are being taken from somewhere because those minutes and those shots have to go to Zach. They're not just coming out the ether. They're taken away from somebody else. We are a franchise and we have a front office that is fighting, competing, and staying competitive for something that isn't truly postseason. That nobody's looking at the Bulls, even if they do make it out the play-in, and saying, oh, the Bulls have a chance to go on a run in the playoffs. What are we really competing for? Because it's not true postseason. It's not any of that. It's not any of that. And if the Bulls do make it, if they get lucky enough to make it out the play-in tournament and then go into the playoffs, they're just going to get destroyed. They're going to get destroyed. I don't care which one of the top 3 teams it is. It can be Boston, Milwaukee, or the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Bulls ain't winning the series. They may win a couple of games, a game, if they get lucky and have one of those moments where they get hot from the field. But this team does not have the type of roster right now to where we're really talking about. I know I did a video a couple days ago saying the Bulls' odds against the other teams that are in the play-in area, and that still holds true. But again, you could be a team that competed against teams above you and still not really be a team ready for the postseason. Now, one could say, get Kobe, get Io some postseason experience. Let's get it. And I understand that. But the problem isn't that. The thing is, it's not getting those players postseason experience. It's the fact that how the front office would use that to then try to sell us on hey, we're not that far off. That's the problem. And I get it where people say, well, I wouldn't mind this team missing the play-in. I won't mind this team if they don't win a play-in game. Let's get out of there and wake up this front office. The problem is this front office has seen this Chicago Bulls team struggle with the same thing for 3 years, and they look at it every time and try to tell us we're not that far off. We're that far off, AK. And until AK, Eversley, ownership, Billy Donovan, God, Jesus, Devontae Christ himself, come and wake this front office up and this team up to say, you're far away. You got to do something. I get holding on to your pieces. We got a team full of guys. I like DeMar DeRozan as a person. I love Lonzo Ball as a person. I like Zach LaVine as a person. Everybody up. I love Javonte Green as a person. I like Nikola Vucevic. I think if you see interviews with Vooch outside of basketball, Vooch is a funny guy. Love Kobe White. Love Iowa. We got a team full of really good, likable guys. But the problem is that shit don't translate to wins on the basketball court. You can be likable and still not achieve shit. Being liked ain't giving you nothing. Being a good person, that gets you something in life, but not in the realm of basketball. The front office has to wake up to what they build is not working anymore. And it's not all of a sudden going to stop working if you just stare at it long enough and hope that it's going to come together in a way that, boom, it's going to start winning games for you. That's not how this works. And until this front office wakes up, I just fear that us continue competing for a play-in is just artificially giving them something that they can give us that really doesn't translate to a goddamn thing. What postseason, bitch? What postseason? This is not one here. We're not competing for a postseason. We're not competing for anything. We're winning some games, and we're going to look good at some times. And I would not be surprised if the Bulls magically go on a 3 or 4 game winning streak. But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing. And this is my second year in a row saying this. There's nothing in no way that this season ends for the Chicago Bulls that changed what's needed to be done this offseason. You got to actually, for once, AK, get off the goddamn pot. Stand the hell up and do something to put this team in the situation that you look at it in. You can't keep operating and making moves as if you're a team that has accomplished it. You ain't accomplished fuck shit. You ain't accomplished a damn thing. Like we haven't accomplished anything. And you keep making moves as if we're a team that made a playoff run. Torrey Craig is the signing that a team that made a playoff run and was missing an enforcer or some shooting and some defense off the bench makes. But we made that as a team that is struggling in almost every aspect of the game. Right? And you keep making these minuscule moves for a coach that needs some help. You need some help. And let's hope that it comes at some point, but I'm going to end this by how I started it. No matter how the Bulls compete, no matter how the Bulls fight over the season, I want to see my team win as many games as possible. Shout out to the Chicago Bulls for however many games they're able to win over this last 8. Would love to see it. Whatever you could do, do it. But I still leave this with this question left. What postseason, bitch? What postseason? But all right, let's go ahead and get into the voicemails for today. We're going to get into this first voicemail. This one is from Larry. This one's from Larry. Let's go ahead and play that now.
What up, Haize? This is Larry out of Mobile. It seems like each of the last 3 seasons we've just had moments where going into the next season it looked like, things were going to be better than the previous one. Being up, then 1-1 going back to Chicago a couple of years ago. Last year's 14-9 finish. And now we're playing, better basketball than what we started. But it seemed like each one of those times there was something that there was some reason. It was an injury somebody was coming back from, or was this past season the discontent with that. Is there anything that you're looking for these the close of these last 10 or so games that will lead you to believe that next season will start differently? Are we going to be a more consistent team? Not necessarily better, but more consistent on a night in and night out basis instead of these slow starts we have? Or do you think that there's just too much of the same with Zach coming back from injury, Pat coming back from injury, Lonzo's status? Do you think there's too much to determine that, or is there something that you're looking at going into the season next year to close this season that would lead you to believe that it would be a different start next season? All right, appreciate it.
I don't think that there's anything. I kind of said this in the last segment. I don't think that there's anything that this team could do to close the season that makes me feel any differently about where this team sits. Honestly, it's too much of the same crap. It's been the same crap for the last 2 years. And at some point, you can keep trying to hope that these minuscule moves pay off big dividends for you. But at some point, as a front office, this front office needs to realize this ain't it. It's not going to get us to where we want to go. It's not going to get us to where you should want us to go. It's not going to get us on the thing that you told us that you want to get. The city of Chicago deserves championships. We deserve to be competing for titles. You're not getting there. If anything, you've gotten further and further away from there. Yeah, your first season, we gave you a pass, right? You traded for Nikola Vucevic that first season after taking over. That team was on pace to make the playoffs before Zach LaVine went down. Kudos. We then, in the second season, after you made all these moves and made these additions, you then have a team that makes the playoffs, that was number 1 team in the East for a while, fell off after injuries, and then you try to use that to sell us on some things, and it did not work. Ultimately, where this team sits right now is a thing that I don't think anything can happen. I don't care if the Bulls win the first round, make it into the second round. It does not change what needs to happen for this team, in my opinion. But you guys can let me know what you guys think on that down below. Great voicemail from Larry, but I just don't look at this and say there's anything that this team can do that changes my mind right now. That's how I feel. Please let me know if you guys feel any differently. But let's go ahead and get into the next voicemail. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Haize? Look, after seeing what Javon Carter has done this free agency, and then, because I've seen this happen before, I'm going to say this to all Bulls fans. Stop wanting players just because of what they do for other teams. You should want a player that complements your team's skill set. And I know a lot of these non-comprehending dumbass Bulls fans are going to be like, what you mean, Shay? You don't make no sense. Okay. See, we kept saying, because a lot of Bulls fans have said they didn't want DeMar DeRozan. Oh, he's not a winner, this and that. before he came to us. And then, hey, they ended up loving him once he started doing what he was doing for us. You know what I mean? But a lot of y'all just see players and just because they could perform well on other teams, and then y'all just want them for just specific teams. They don't even look at how their skill set even fits our team. Like, for example, a lot of people wanted Jeremy Grant. Now, Jeremy Grant is not the defender that he once was in Oklahoma City. And then, too, on a winning team, he doesn't perform too well unless he's coming off the bench. We've seen it before. He's put up big numbers in Detroit. He's even putting up big numbers in Portland. But Bulls fans still want him for some odd reason. He's not a winning player. And then after seeing what Javon Carter has done with the Bucks and what he's doing now, it's safe to say you shouldn't want a player just because of what they do on another team. You should want a player just to see how their skill set fits with your team. For example, I want OG Anunoby, not because of what he's one of the numbers that he's producing right now, but because I know that next to Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, he's a pretty good defender. He could take a lot of pressure off Ayo on the defensive end. He can take a lot of pressure off of Patrick Williams if you want Patrick Williams to be that 20-point per game score like you want him to. And plus, we already got a center that doesn't play good defense. And then on top of that, although Kobe White has been improving a little bit, he's not the strongest defender. That's what a guy like OG Anunoby or a guy like Mikal Bridges could bring to our team. That's why I want them, not because of what they average. But hey, that's just me. Anyway, tell me what you think, Haize. Peace.
All right, and I agree with everything that Shay said here. You should want a player based off fit, not thinking that everything that they bring over is just going to translate exactly for a new team. Like, there's some players that have universal games that as long as you give them the opportunity, they're pretty much going to be able to give you the same production, but not everything is as seamless. You have to look at it as why. Like, especially when you're looking at role players, you got to look at how they play off those roles. Especially if they're playing off superstars, that can drastically change how easy or much more difficult their role is. Javon Carter, for example, coming here, it's totally different because, again, we don't have off-ball movement. We don't have a player with the gravity of Giannis Antetokounmpo, and unfortunately, it plays into what we're seeing now with this team. And so that's going to be something that always hurts us, right? So you do always want to look at fit, but even then, you can look at fit on the court, and it necessarily doesn't translate into reality, which I still think is a thing with Javon Carter, because theoretically what he brought, defense, three-point shooting, that should be able to, that's something that every single team needs, especially as a point of attack defender. But Javon Carter came here and not brought any of that at the major level. You brought up Jeremy Grant, things like that. Like, Jeremy Grant isn't a winning player. I haven't seen anybody recently bring up Jeremy Grant. That was a thing kind of a couple of years ago. I think people now realize that Jeremy Grant is one of those players where he's going to get his stats, but it doesn't necessarily contribute to winning. And I just think ultimately it comes down to that. And that's why when people talk about, like, oh, get this player, get that player, get this player, get that player, you got to also think about the fit. You got to think about how they get their points. And that's where advanced analytics really do help with that, is how a player, like, for example, DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic, you look at how DeMar breaking down defenses, getting to the free throw line. Nikola Vucevic, a big who can operate in the low post and extend out to the three-pointer to a little bit, even though we want to see him take less threes. But then you got to look at the analytics. Where do their offense start at? Then when you start looking at their offense starts at the same exact spots, that's where you start seeing, okay, it's not as easy to fit those two pieces together. So that's the job of the front office, and that's why it's not as easy as us fans sometimes make it seem as far as adding pieces to teams. It doesn't always work out that way because you have to really look at how, where, and the fit there with the pieces that fit together. That's also why rotations are such an important thing, right? That's why Billy Donovan failing at rotations is such a major thing, because he just doesn't know how to ebb and flow of the players fitting together. And unfortunately, that's where we sit, man. But great voicemail there from Shay. Make sure you guys send voicemails. I want to hear from all of you guys, man. Make sure you guys send in voicemails. We'll tell you how to do that here in a second. Make sure you're following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.